This hope is what guides today's conversation. So today, we've invited 6 students to share. Each student will talk about their experience with injustice and what their faith teaches about identifying and addressing it. So, first up, we have Isaiah, a 22 from Detroit. Isaiah will speak about his experiences as a Black man and his Christian faith background. Then Divya will speak about her Hindu faith and how it has served as a foundation for her during tumultuous times. Becky comes from a Jewish faith background and will speak about anti Semitism and the importance of community when addressing injustice. Next, Eric will talk about his Quaker faith and how that informed his dedication to environmental justice. Then Khadijah, at 24, will speak about her Muslim faith and how that informed her pursuit of educational equality. And finally, Lisa will talk about the Baha'i faith and how it has informed her understanding of injustice and dedication to addressing it. I hope that after today, we just feel a little bit closer as a community when addressing injustice. As Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. So, once again, thank you for coming out today, and let's hear from our panel.
Hi, everybody. My name is Isaiah Johnson. I'm a government major and member of the Dartmouth football team. You're 2019 Ivy League champs. I'm currently in my second term of my junior year. I first want to start out by thanking Kalia Hunter, Dean Litwin, and the entire Voices of Faith initiative for the opportunity to be on this panel and join such an important discussion in the context of our current times. Now to the question at hand that you heard Kalia talk about, what does faith teach about injustice? I identify as a non denominational Christian, even though the churches I've attended my whole life have always had a heavy influence of Baptist ambiance and traditions. Growing up in this environment, while the demographic was predominantly Black, it was always clear that the religion I followed was heavily whitewashed. This realization has always been an integral part of my walk of faith because as a Black man, you must come to terms with the horrors that define the history of white Christianity. White Americans use scriptures to justify the enslavement of my ancestors, while white supremacist groups that claim the same faith as me want nothing more but to see me persecuted. Furthermore, the feeling of praying to the pale skinned, long haired, blue eyed, Eurocentric Jesus that had become the face of Christianity left me unsure of my own faith. The spiritual no man's land this put me in has only been amplified by the current social conditions. So when I sat down to answer the question presented for this panel, I felt like the best starting point would be the verse found in Leviticus 19:15, where it states, "You shall do no injustice in judgment. You shall not be partial to the poor, nor honor the person of the mighty." What this verse did for me personally was settle my heart and reminding me that while my faith can be twisted and tainted by the actions of people, the power of my beliefs remains in the hands of God. Even more so, it gave me a clear stance on how God views injustice, and more specifically, injustice that involves partiality. While this confirmed for me what my position should be in the midst of all that has happened, I was still looking for what my call to action was that also fell in line with my faith. Now, as a young Black man in the midst of so much social unrest regarding the injustices done to the Black community, I understood I had an important role to play, not only as a member of the community, but also because of my religious convictions. This also brought questions of, does my religious beliefs condemn some of the actions that have been done in the name of the cause? And I had to ask myself, where do I draw the line? I found my answer when I looked back into the book of Proverbs. Growing up, my dad had always told me that Proverbs was a place in the Bible where I could always find wisdom and peace. The verse Proverbs 29:27 that says, "Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute. Open your mouth, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and needy," is where I found my wisdom during these times. This verse became the foundation for how I moved through these socially turbulent times. I can't be silent, I can't be still, but I have an obligation, both in my standing as a Black man and through my beliefs, to speak out and defend the rights of my people in the face of injustice. When it comes to the case of the riots, it isn't my job to judge people's own convictions, but instead to look at my own. The truth is that if my own principles are compromised and I'm only looking for vengeance, I'm no longer acting within my Christian ideals because I know that vengeance is God's. For me, my faith not only guides me, but it gives solid ground to my convictions and brings me a sense of stability and pursuit of justice.
That was really good, Isaiah. I'm Divya. I'm a senior at Dartmouth, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about how my relationship with my faith has kind of changed over time. The entire week before my 8th birthday party, the weather forecast reported a 90% chance of rain on the day of my outdoor treasure hunt themed celebration. The night before, I excitedly jumped into the car to head to Friday Puja. My parents had never seen me so eager to attend. I recited my prayers with passion and in my mind pleaded for the weather forecast to work out in my favor. After all, I felt that my faith in Hinduism would always protect me from injustices I couldn't control, like a rained out 8th birthday. The next day was filled with sunshine, and not a single cloud hovered over my friends and family during my party. Put good thoughts and actions into the world, and you will get good out of the world. Put bad thoughts and actions into the world, and you will get bad out of the world. The simple logic of karma was ingrained into my mind at a young age. But as I grew up, I didn't feel like this equation really added up. I was constantly comparing myself to others, and suddenly I could only look at myself as the victim. This created a cycle where the injustice I faced, whether systematic or individual, slowly chipped away at the faith I had established as a child. As my relationship with religion ebbed and flowed, I started to question how such unquivering devotion remained strong in my parents. In my early teen years, I would play devil's advocate and ask my parents to prove the stories in ancient Sanskrit texts were true. Yet my skepticism never displaced their beliefs in Hindu scripture. It was during one of these interrogations that my dad stopped arguing the legitimacy of the gods we pray to and said to me, "At the end of the day, I need something to feel grounded." These words marked an important shift in my relationship with my faith. I caught a glimpse of how freeing my faith could be if I learned to separate worldly logic from my own spiritual needs. With logic and numbers, you can explain things down to their very core. Yet the most quantitative and logical person I know embraced his faith as his ground. It was at this moment that I was able to see how the countless layers of injustice my parents faced to build their lives today did not break their spirits or hinder their ability to want to live their next day to the fullest. In reframing my mindset around religion, I was able to stop trying to place blame onto anyone or anything for my difficulties, and accepting that karma and my faith as a Hindu was not going to protect me from injustice, I was able to allow my faith to ground me. Having secured this mindset prior to entering college was integral to how I recognized and processed injustice on Dartmouth's campus. Our institution was founded on inherently unjust principles that limited education to a mere few. And even as time has passed, we now see a campus much more diverse. The struggles to get here were filled with erasure and discrimination of minority identities. The systems under which this college was founded are still deeply ingrained into students' present day experience. As a woman of color on campus, there are places where I feel like an imposter, where I feel like I have something to prove, and there are places where I feel unsafe. This is inherently unjust, but the roots of this injustice are not something my own individual actions can dismantle. My previous mindset would only let the discomfort I felt on campus beat down my own faith and cause me to venture down a pessimistic hole. But instead, my faith now catches me and provides me with a ground when I feel like I'm falling. Thank you.
Thanks, Divya and Isaiah. It's really an honor to hear you guys speak. Um, hi everyone. I'm Becky. I'm a 21. I'm from Toronto. Thank you for having me here to speak. And I'm excited to share with you this evening some of the ways Judaism has helped me cope with injustice. As I begin my senior year in this disorienting and unsettling way, I think it's interesting to think back to the beginning of my freshman year and everything that was going on way back then. I remember it primarily as a time of great hope, the thought of starting off in a new country with new people and new friends who had no idea who I was or where I was coming from. When I take off my rose-colored nostalgia glasses, though, I recall that things were not nearly as hopeful as I remember them to be. As I'm sure many of you remember, mid-August of the summer of 2017, or the summer before my freshman year, white nationalists, neo-Nazis, and members of the KKK gathered for the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. With tiki torches and swastikas, they chanted racist and anti-Semitic slurs, spewing hatred and intolerance unlike anything, quite frankly, I had ever experienced. After Charlottesville, along with many other North American Jews, the privileged bubble that I had been existing in, where I had never had to confront explicit anti-Semitism, began to evaporate before my eyes. I thought of my grandmother, who survived Auschwitz and the Holocaust when she was only 14, later escaping to America. My heart breaks to think of her watching the same hatred play out on its streets, only to have the president refer to very fine people on both sides. Coming into college, more unsure than ever about the country I was now supposed to call my home, I, like I do almost any time I'm confronted with hardship or injustice, turn to Judaism. At the time, though, I didn't quite know what this meant in terms of theology or teachings. All I knew was how to be an unapologetically Jewish woman. Once at Dartmouth, I threw myself into the Jewish community, immediately finding a home and a safe haven amidst the craziness of freshman fall. I found comfort in the routines of each week, in the same prayers on Friday nights and Saturday mornings, the traditional foods eaten on the high holidays each fall, and in the people who met me where I was at with regards to faith, spirituality, and observance. Judaism has provided me with a way to find community and meaning no matter where I go. On my abroad term, I attended a 400-person Passover Seder in Berlin, which felt like the biggest FU to neo-Nazis everywhere. Of course, the scourge of injustice, intolerance, and anti-Semitism has resurfaced a few times during my Dartmouth career, most notably in fall 2018, when 11 Jews were killed during Shabbat morning services at the Tree of Life congregation in Pittsburgh. This time, what struck me most was not just how the Jewish community responded, but how members of all different faiths and backgrounds stood in solidarity with us. The multi-faith, multi-group, everyone from all across campus candlelit vigil on the green has been one of my most meaningful moments at Dartmouth. As time has gone on, my faith has given me a wider approach to injustice and has helped me to recognize and reconcile it in communities other than my own, so that I may stand with others as they have stood for me. More than anything, Judaism teaches me to hope that despite Charlottesville, Pittsburgh, or the many other atrocities Jews have faced, there must always be a sense of work to be done, of justice to be pursued. Hope, after all, requires us to work together to make things better. As one of my favorite quotes from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs goes, in Judaism, faith is not acceptance but protest against the world that is, in the name of the world that is not yet, but ought to be. I've had to learn how a Jewish approach to hopeful justice can be woven into the thread of daily life, rather than a pursuit that runs parallel to it. By listening to perspectives other than my own, combating injustice in all its forms, and recognizing the image of God that's present in every human, I think we become one step closer to achieving justice, not only in the Jewish community, but in everyone around us. Thank you.
Thank you guys for everything you've said so far and the chance to speak. Good evening. I'm Eric Kernowitz. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm 23 at Dartmouth in Maryland, and I'm a Quaker. A large part of my choice of faith stems from Quakers' long history of justice. The foundational testimonies of the Society of Friends are integrity, equality, simplicity, community, stewardship of the earth, and peace. Justice is a worthy goal, but one with a clouded and often mysterious solution. Injustice is so difficult to address, in part because it always consists of many smaller instances of injustice, and teasing them apart can be impossible. But when asked to consider an injustice I had experienced, my first thought went to environmental injustice in my hometown. As I came home from Dartmouth at the beginning of the pandemic, I was shocked at how much it had changed. Maryland has seen some of the most rapid growth in the country, and the burden from development has not been dealt equally. Reckless building has put our food system at risk, as farms have been filled with houses, and miles of asphalt have led to 2 deadly 1,000-year floods within 3 years of each other that nearly wiped out historic Ellicott City and claimed several lives. The city, a small mill town where they still process cornmeal, and has been the center of life in the county since the 1800s, saw growth of housing upriver, which was done cheaply and without investing in proper management. This, coupled with changing weather and intense storms from climate change, resulted in these life-changing floods. The beautiful old buildings were torn away, cars were tossed about, and 3 people actually lost their lives. My sister was visiting her boyfriend at the time, and their house is above the town on a hill, and she got stuck there for several days. The evidence is all around that the world is changing and the costs are not being fairly imposed. This small instance is once again composed of many fibers. There's pollution, there's lack of community investment, there's gentrification, fraudulent business practices. But I want to focus on how my faith informs my view of the environment and environmental injustice. This small instance of Ellicott City pales in comparison to the environmental racism in Louisiana with Cancer Alley or the ship scrapping yards in Bangladesh. But I can relate to the almost physical pain of seeing a forest cleared or land cleaved apart that once lay fallow. Although our ability for destruction has never been greater, the experience is as old as time. Christian cultures have often misconstrued God's instructions to be fruitful and multiply as permission for unfettered consumption. But even in the book of Genesis, all of the universe is created for man, and we are tasked as ruling over it. We should be the most humble of creatures, not the most arrogant. God instead entrusts us with protection of the earth as its stewards. Such leadership should constitute service over profit. In a sermon, Jesus scolds his disciples on their anxiety, saying, "Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet our heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they?" Quakers take God's urging to mean a Christian should live a life of simplicity and thus conservation. Using our privileges to benefit while sullying the world for those less powerful makes pollution theft and thus forbade in the Eighth Amendment. Pollution has the dynamic of not only robbing the poor and minorities, but also future generations. What we do now, our children will have no control over, but they will suffer the consequences. The earth is God's alone. We are merely made in and of him. In Leviticus, it is said, "The land must not be sold permanently, because the land is mine, and you are but aliens and my tenants. Throughout the country that you hold as possession, you must provide for the redemption of the land." I think this sentiment that one must provide for the land in equal measure as it sustains you is carried in almost all religions. No one single entity is to blame for environmental injustice. So how can we collaborate to care for the earth across all faith traditions and all humanity? Religion has long been an instrument for social change. My Christian faith clearly informs my action, and I'm sure many of these moral truths are present across humanity. Working together is the only way environmental conservation will be achieved. And as such, an interfaith perspective can serve in guiding our approach. I want to close with asking you, at some point this week, find time to sit in silent contemplation of whatever faith or philosophy that you prescribe to, and wait for the guiding light to show you your personal path in this collective goal of conservation. Thank you.
Thank you all for everything that you've said. I think I've related to every person in some respect, and I think that's a very cool thing to notice among all of us from different faith traditions. So last fall, during my off term, I was serving in Elliott, Maine at the Greenacre Baha'i Center for Learning. I'm a Baha'i. And one of my favorite things that we did there was assist with the children's classes. So each week we would teach the children a different virtue: love, unity, joyfulness. The second week we talked about justice. In a nutshell, respecting the rights of human beings, of animals, and of our environment. Later that same week, the adults of the community joined together to talk about community building and inviting more families to participate in these spiritual empowerment activities like the children's classes. In conversation with the mother of one of the children in the class, I learned that up until she had looked at the study materials, she believed that justice meant revenge, an eye for an eye. At first, this took me by surprise as a child who myself had been taught these lessons about justice. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it was no surprise that she was wary of what her daughter might be taught about justice. I think one only has to grow up in a world where justice is served when people go to jail, and when what you deserve is punishment, regardless of the injustices that have happened to you in your life. I've experienced times, especially in college, where I'm tempted to give into my anger and despair, to seek revenge myself, and to support causes that only tout a mirage of justice. But in reality, when I return an unjust act, I am not restoring justice, I'm only adding to the injustice in the world. And essentially, I'm relinquishing my hope that there is a better solution. Baha'u'llah, who is the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, explains that there is no greater oppression than that a soul seeking the truth should not know where to find it. To me, that means that the onus of freedom from injustice is upon me. I'm the keeper of my own spiritual and moral convictions, and hope is only lost when I lose it. By using my spirituality as a guide and letting my soul seek truth, I can navigate false narratives, misinformation, and a society that is materialistic and denies that I even have spiritual fulfillments. Personally, it has taken a lot of guts for me to swallow these difficult truths. It's incredibly frustrating to be compassionate to those that have wronged me. It is so hard to look upon myself as a source of justice when it seems to me that everything is out of my power. So here's the disclaimer. Almost none of us are in a position where our ignorance is the single source of our oppression. Abdu'l-Baha, who in the faith represents the perfect exemplar, warns us that while we must be compassionate to all humankind, kindness cannot be shown to the tyrant, the deceiver, or the thief. It is another test of character and investigation for us to recognize those that will take kindness as an example to be followed and those that will take advantage of kindness. I have learned that it is both an act of justice to myself and to others to reserve my energy and kindness where it is effective and not allow forces of injustice to thrive off the energy that only I can give. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And it looks like Khadijah was able to reconnect, so would love for you to finish up.
Yes, thank you. So should I just start over? I don't know where I cut off at. I guess it's the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, feel free to start over.
Okay. So in the Quran, there's a verse. He raised it high and he set up the measure. This verse is interpreted to mean that Allah raised the scales and established justice. He established a balanced system. The Quran teaches us that injustice is not acceptable, no matter the circumstances, and Islam views people as custodians of the world. We humans are expected to take care of each other and take care of the earth. We're expected to be fair, but yet we've all seen injustices. When I think of the injustices in my life, I think about the racial and economic injustice and the disparity of education, specifically in my hometown. I was raised in a household that believed in education. I was blessed. I am blessed to be able to have a mom like I have. I attended Lamar School, a private college preparatory school that challenged me and provided me resources to lead a successful life. Sadly, I know students that didn't have the same opportunity, and it's simply because the public school district in my town is not a priority. Considering that the school district is 91% Black, the school district hinders Black children from getting the education they need to succeed. I've tutored students from all 3 levels of primary school, both public and private, and the biggest difference is the environment. My students tell me shocking stories all the time about what they see and hear in overpacked classrooms, and I empathize with them. As someone who needed quiet to concentrate, I understand what they're going through. The constant noise was enough for me to easily lose focus and not get my work done promptly. I remember my teachers not being able to provide one-on-one attention because there were just too many students in the class. The students I tutor also bring up the same issue. They aren't able to learn and understand. To know that my experience 10 years ago is still shared with present students is disheartening. And to know that this injustice is happening all across the country in public schools is maddening. How can a teacher, one person, be expected to attend to 25 students? How can students be given the tools and attention they need to succeed? How can they be expected to do well on tests and assessments when there's too many students in the classroom? How can Black students, who primarily make up these overpopulated school districts, be expected to succeed in the world when they aren't being prepared properly? My faith views all injustices as intolerable, but the education injustice holds a special place in my heart. My fellow brothers and sisters in my community aren't being prepared for the future. Because as the late Malcolm X said, education is the passport to the future, for the future belongs to those who prepare for it today. In writing, faith teaches us that injustice is wrong. With the knowledge I have planned to devote myself to closing the gap and eliminating injustice in our education system. My faith has given me these tools, the knowledge, and the resources to be a custodian and help dissolve this injustice. My faith has given me the strength and power to help my community, help my people, and help the people of the world receive the education they deserve, regardless of finance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, you guys, for sharing. This was very beautiful and very informative. You don't often get the chance to hear from different faith backgrounds. So this has been really amazing. So with this, we're going to move into our Q&A session. So to start off, I guess, does anybody on the panel have any questions for each other? If so, feel free to just unmute and ask each other. If not, that's also okay.
I'll just respond to Eric's comment, which was that Baha'is and Quakers face similar spiritual and moral dilemmas in the commitment to peace and kindness, and that resonated with him. And first of all, thank you for sharing that. Also that, yeah, the Baha'i faith is really all about world unity and like ultimate peace. So I understand why that resonated with you.
Awesome. And then just as a reminder to our participants, if you have a question, feel free to use the raise hand function. And then, when I call your name, you feel free to unmute and you can ask your question. So one of the first questions we've got is, so how is it hearing from your peers? You all had such a different approach to this topic. What is the experience like, now sitting down and hearing how 5 of your peers have responded to the same prompt?
I'll say that definitely all of the similarities jumped out at me as soon as Isaiah started speaking about how he, I thought there was a similar vein that committing acts of injustice or like seeking revenge is just the same as the initial injustice in some ways. And like Eric was talking about the environment, and I knew that that was a very important aspect of justice in general. So definitely I related to what everyone was saying, and that was a really cool feeling, even though we come from such different backgrounds.
Yeah, I think, at least on Dartmouth campus, in my experience there, people don't necessarily talk openly about their faith just in, casual interactions. And so often if you're surrounded by people, who are different than you in, either subtle ways or more obvious ways, like sometimes faith isn't one of the things that comes up in that discussion. So I'm definitely grateful for the opportunity to hear from all of you guys, not just about your own experiences, but the different approaches that each of your faiths take to justice and injustice, because that hasn't really been an experience I've gotten yet at college. So it's been really, really interesting. So thank you.
Yeah, going off of that, I feel like at Dartmouth, injustices are like often talked about openly, either in class, and I think there's like a good population that cares about addressing injustices, but talking about that in context with faith is never really something that's done a lot. So it was really cool to kind of discuss that in this environment.
I think that something that really struck me, and I had a lot of trouble writing the paper, is like I realized how broad just injustice is. I talked to Kalia about this. Like it was an interesting proposition. I don't know, because and something I really came to realize is like the way that the element of a piece of injustice you like first notice, I think often is how people end up treating it. And I was just thinking, it's just interesting how like different faith perspectives and then also different personal experiences cause people to address sometimes like similar things from a different angle. Oh, and I had a question for Isaiah. I was just curious, like, since you have had like, there's obviously so much history with Christianity in Africa, often negative. Like, have you looked at other faiths and stuff? Like, how did you arrive at staying with Christianity?
So I'll say this: I've always personally identified as a Christian. I've probably looked into, just out of curiosity, into a lot of different religions, whether it be in the academic sphere or just in my own personal time. Um, just they interested me off me hearing something that just sounded like I'd want to pursue it a little further. But I guess it really has a lot to do with my upbringing. I was raised to be a Christian, and as you heard in what I was said in my initial speech, it was something where I had to get to the place where I was able to separate the people from the actual belief that I had for myself. So, like I said, there's a lot of bad in the history of Christianity, but my belief in God and Jesus as His Son who died for me on the cross is a separate thing from the people and even the title Christianity in and of itself. It's something that you either believe in its entirety and you go from that position, or it's just something where it's the same as hearing a fact in a classroom. So for me, it wasn't so much having to challenge my religion, because I think we all have our own faith, and we go about how that influences our life from that point of view. But for me, it was just one of those things where separating the people from my actual true belief in God and everything around my religion was just something that gave me peace with the things that aren't honestly pretty.
I think that just shows the strength of love for God and like the what that can do to unite people and also just to give you a purpose in your own life. Like despite all of the bad, there's that thing that remains and that you can hold on to. And I guess that's dealing with injustice.
Yeah, to that point, it gets to a place where in those moments, who do you blame? Either you blame the power at B, or you blame the man who did it. And so for me personally, I tend to blame people and our own human nature for the injustices that occur, and my religion just sometimes is the justification for whatever that was.
Okay, great. And then we have one more question. So the question is, what was the process of preparing for this panel? Was it easy or hard to identify injustices within your own life?
I can start. For me, it was actually pretty simple. I don't know how you can be a Black person during everything that's going on and not be able to sit down and have a conversation or even think about the injustices that are going on. So it's pretty simple to start getting in that mind frame and thinking towards that direction. Um, and then just growing up, I've had a lot of discussions where I've had to kind of put my religion and my race in conversation, just either talking to my dad or my siblings or my mother or things like that. So for this, it wasn't too hard, but it definitely took some thought and making sure that my words were portraying exactly what I wanted them to.
Yeah, I think I, on the other hand, as a white person, had a much harder time identifying lived experiences of injustice. And so at first it was something that I approached from a rather academic angle. And then on the review of the first draft, it was like, okay, you got to make this personal. And I realized that injustice is something that you can either be someone who's complacent in injustice, or you can actively work against injustice. So I think even if injustice hasn't been something that I've been experiencing like very blatantly in my life, it's something that I can't say like I don't affect or hasn't affected me. So I just had to think about what are my personal responses and how do I contribute to either one or the other.
So yeah, I didn't think it was too difficult. I think for me, it was just deciding which injustice to talk about. And at first, I did approach this as an academic standpoint with like more facts and statistics, and which they both had to do with the education system, but that's just the one that I chose that means the most to me. So like again, like it's hard. You can't be a Black person and like not know some kind of injustice in some way of your life. So I just decided to talk about one that was really important to me. As a Muslim one, but I grew up in Mississippi, so I went to actually Baptist churches, and I actually went to a Catholic middle school. So it's kind of like a lot of those teachings. It was like, okay, so how do I want to address this? How do I want to go about this? So that's how it was for me.
I think, Lisa, a lot of what you said, I had a really similar experience, trying to rack my brain and put something together for the panel. I honestly questioned if like my voice needed to be added to the conversation. I think I came into this, I was like, I would so much rather hear from other people. I felt like I had a lot more to learn rather than to teach. And so I think that was a really humbling experience, not one that I necessarily was novel to me, and recognizing my own privilege as a white woman. Um, but it kind of caused me to sort of dig deep, think about, experiences or events where I have experienced injustice, and, not only think about myself and how that affected me, but the larger community and which communities were there with me to bring me through that injustice, however, brief. And so that's sort of the approach that I took writing this. At first, I think like Khadija and Lisa, you both said, I was kind of like, okay, well, what does Judaism teach about injustice? Like, here we go. Let's, look at the Torah. But recognizing the power of like individual story and personal story in getting beliefs across and experiences across, I think is really important and was definitely something I was trying to keep in mind writing the speech.
Okay, great. So I'm sorry, it started raining here, but we're gonna have to move on just because it's time. I hope you guys can hear me. I apologize for this. But just to address quickly the question asked, we chose this panel by peer recommendations and faculty recommendations. So everybody you see here was recommended by either a faculty member or their friends for just being really insightful and overall having some awesome, amazing things to say. And so I see the other questions, but because of time, you won't be able to address it in the larger group. But feel free to bring it up in the breakout groups. And so with that, we're going to transition into the breakout rooms now. Awesome. Well, I think everybody who's gonna make it back is back. So I just want to say a really big thank you to our panelists. What you guys shared was absolutely beautiful, and like a lot of people are saying, we don't really have these types of spaces or opportunities to really talk about these types of things. So it's really awesome for your peers to be able to hear really powerful, deep reflections, especially in a time like this. I'd also like to give a huge thank you to conference and events. Without them, this would not be possible. And they were so helpful in helping us transition this once huge event and call us underground into a virtual event. But the beauty of this is that, we got a lot of family members and people who otherwise might not have been able to come. So, bright side of COVID, so thank you to all the family members who came and all the participants who came, all of our facilitators. We really appreciate you. And a big thank you to the Tucker staff. A lot of work went in on the background. And so big thank you to Lena and Khalil and Dean Litwin and everyone who helped make this possible. And so, with this, I just want to say, if you enjoyed these types of conversations, feel free to come to Multi-Faith Conversations, which is every Tuesday at 6 o'clock. Additionally, we have a Speed Stories coming up on Sunday for Latinx Heritage Month. So join us virtually. That will be at 6 p.m. on Saturday, October 24th. And so, if you enjoyed these conversations, feel free to come to any more Tucker events. And, I don't want to keep us too much over, but I hope everybody has a really great rest of your night, rest of your term, rest of your year. But thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Kalia. Big thank you to Kalia. And if anyone wants to hang out and just chat and chill a little bit, some of us will hang in there. But thank you from everyone at Tucker, and deepest appreciation for each and every one of you and for who you are and for being present tonight for a challenging, meaningful, deep, real conversation that we hope will continue. Good night all. Thank you. Thank you.